The Flash movie was pretty good, but I wouldn't say it lives up to the hype of being one of the best superhero movies of all time. So let's talk about it. As always, this video will have spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, head over to my shorts or my TikTok and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about The Flash. Now, considering that this movie has pretty much been in production hell for the past decade or so, it turned out pretty well. The story was good, it had a great emotional core to it with Barry and his mom, and I think they adapted the Flashpoint Paradox storyline really well to live action, so let's get into what this movie is about. In this movie, Barry travels back in time to save his mom, but when he realizes he creates a completely different timeline and everything is messed up, he has to work with his younger self, Batman, and Supergirl to find a way to make things right and stop this new timeline's General Zod. Starting off with the good, and I won't touch on this much because this guy has done some pretty terrible things off screen, but Ezra Miller did a really good job in this movie. He essentially had to play two characters in this movie, and it worked out really well. The relationship that Barry had with his younger self in this movie was a big part of the overall plot of the film, and it was funny, and as weird as it is to say, Ezra Miller has really good chemistry with himself. Next up for the good is the story. Now, the story was really good in this, and as I said before, they did a really solid job at adapting the Flashpoint storyline to this movie. There were a lot of things that were different, but I think they nailed the most important part, and that is the relationship that Barry had with his mother. Every time Barry had a moment with his mother in this movie, you really felt the emotion of that scene. Especially towards the end when he got that moment with his mom in the grocery store when he went to go back and take the tomatoes and put them back where they should be to ultimately let her die. That was one of the more emotional scenes in this movie and probably one of the more powerful and just one of the best scenes in the movie overall, because you really felt that emotion between Barry and his mom, and it just hit really hard, and everything they tried to convey with that scene and tried to do with that scene worked to a T. But overall, this story was essentially about Barry letting go of the past and accepting that his past is what made him who he is now. And next up for the good is Michael Keaton's Batman. Now, he was easily one of the best parts of this entire movie. Yes, it was cool to see him back in the cape and cowl, but when it came to the action, he had some of the best action scenes in this movie. And I'll even go as far to say that this may be some of the best Batman action I've seen ever. The scene where they're breaking Supergirl out of that prison is one of the first times we get to see him in action, and it was just awesome. The suit looked great. The action was phenomenal. I mean, he was beating up dudes left and right. And honestly, you could just really tell throughout this whole entire movie that Michael Keaton loves playing Batman because he is just so good at it. And it was just so fun to watch him get back in the suit and be Batman. But that kind of leads me into the next thing that is good about this movie, and that is the action. Overall, the action was really good in this movie, in my opinion, even though at some points the CGI in some of these action scenes was not the best. I'll say that. It was not the best, but that is something I'm going to get into a little bit later in this video. We got to see the Flash use his powers in cool new ways. I'm pretty sure at one point he threw like a lightning tornado. Seeing Supergirl in action was also really cool, even though she was really only in like the third act of this movie. But as I said before, the Batman action stole the show and is easily the best action in this movie. But before I get on to the so-so, I have to mention that the humor in this movie was really good as well. This movie was just genuinely funny throughout, and it did a good job at balancing the serious moments with the more humorous moments, so I just had to bring that up. This movie was really funny, and I thought they did really well with the humor. Now getting into the so-so, and first up for this, I have Supergirl. And let me start by saying this has nothing to do with Sasha Calle's performance because she did great in her role as Supergirl. I just think they didn't really do much with her character. She kind of just shows up right before the third act and decides to help them after they rescued her, and I just think they could have did a little bit more with her character to make her more intriguing. But I will say one of the cooler things they did with her character is when she found out that Zod had killed Clark when he was a baby, and that kind of made her freak out and start beating Zod up. I thought that was a really cool part, but at the end of the day, this movie was kind of marketed as having her as being a bigger part in this movie, and she really wasn't in this movie all that much, and I guess I just really wanted more out of her character, have her character be a little bit more fleshed out, other than just showing up at the end, beating up some bad guys, and then eventually dying as she does in this movie. And finally, for the so-so, I have the ending slash climax of the movie. Now, I don't really know how I feel about this yet, but I do feel like it was a little bit rushed and it was anticlimactic in my opinion. I thought the whole reveal of who this evil speedster was that was in the Speed Force was kind of predictable, and it felt like in this scene that they really just wanted to show you all these cameos instead of really focus on everything we just found out. I just wish they would have focused more on the story and the ending of the story rather than have all these cameos right there in the climax of your movie, because in my opinion that kind of took away from what was actually happening. But at the very end of the movie, I did like that they freed Barry's dad, and that kind of goes back to that detail that I was talking about when Barry took the tomatoes and put them on the top shelf so his dad would look up at the camera. I just thought that was really cool, and as I said before, is the silver lining of Barry's story in this movie. But I do have to mention, like, is George Clooney Batman again? Like, what's going on with that? That was kind of like a random reveal slash cameo. I know they're rebooting this whole thing, but yeah, what's going on with George Clooney and being Batman again? And finally, let's get into the bad. And first up for the bad is the villains. And technically, I guess there was two villains. We had Zod and then that evil speedster. I'm just gonna refer to him as Dark Flash, even though I don't know if that's what they were going for in this movie. But to be honest, these villains kind of sucked. It felt like they used Zod as just kind of like a throwaway villain, because at the end of the day, he really didn't serve any purpose to the plot at all. He was really not in this movie that much at all. And then we have Dark Flash, who also really didn't do much. I mean, he showed up right there in the beginning when he punched Barry out of the Speed Force, and then he popped up briefly in like a little, I guess, dream that Barry had when he was knocked out from the lightning. But he was just underwhelming as a villain because he was defeated fairly easily, and that's part of the reason I thought this movie was a little anticlimactic, because we got to the big bad, we found out who he was, thought there was gonna be this huge, big, awesome battle, and then they just kind of defeated him pretty easily. He went to kill Barry, younger Barry jumped in the way and it killed him, and there goes Dark Flash, movie over. So I just thought the villains were very underutilized in this movie and just very underwhelming overall. And finally, for the bad, and I've been waiting to talk about this one, but the CGI was absolutely horrid in this movie. Yes, in some scenes it was pretty good, it was passable, but in other scenes it was just, it looked like a video game at some points. I felt like I was playing my PS2 up there on the big screen there. Especially in that opening scene where Flash is saving the babies, and the babies, let's be honest, they look like Play-Doh. They honestly look like Play-Doh. It just didn't look great at all. There was people behind me in the theater kind of laughing at it, at how fake the babies looked and things like that. And I guess apparently, according to the director, this was done on purpose, but hey, you can say what you want, whether it was done on purpose or by mistake. Bad CGI is bad CGI, my friend. And it wasn't the best in this movie. But anyways, overall, The Flash was a pretty good movie. It has great emotion at its core and some good action despite the CGI. It was funny, entertaining, and Michael Keaton back as Batman was awesome. This is a live-action Flashpoint movie, and I think they did that story justice. Those are my thoughts on The Flash. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shop easyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.